Hi, I'm Carolyn, and today we're going to be talking about the basics of HTML and CSS, which together serve as the foundation for designing web pages. We're going to be going through some demo code today. The link for that is in the description, along with some other helpful resources for learning HTML and CSS. As always, if you like this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. So let's get started. First, what are HTML and CSS? In a sentence, HTML is the content of your page, and CSS is how you design that content. So let's look at some code to see what I mean. So on the right, I have an HTML file open on my browser, and on the left is that actual file. So there's no CSS connected to this file, which means that I haven't designed this page at all. So you might be wondering, if I haven't assigned any kind of design to this page, why is it that my web page is big and in bold? Why does the link look like a link? Why does this look like a bulleted list, etc.? And the reason for that is tags. So tags are what you see in this file in red, this H1, this A, this P, and tags assign meaning to the content of your page. So when you're creating a web page in HTML, you want to assign meaning to the different parts of your content. You want to say this part is a header, this part is a link, this part is a paragraph, so that then you can style those specific elements in your CSS, which we'll get to a little bit later. But when you don't have any kind of CSS connected, the browser assigns default appearance to those different tags. So if the browser sees an H1 tag, it has default appearance for an H1 tag, which in this case is to be big and bold, which makes sense because usually headers are larger than the other content on the page. Same thing, if I have an unordered list, which is what UL stands for, the default appearance for that is to be a bulleted list. And I could override all of this in my CSS if I wanted to, but this way I don't have to create CSS. If I'm happy with it being a bulleted list, then I don't have to change it. I can just keep the default functionality in my browser. So how do I create tags? How do I assign meaning to my page's content? So to create a tag, you first do an opening caret, and then the name of the tag that you want to assign. So if you want it to be a header, you have H1 through H6. The larger the number, the smaller the header. So if I had H2, that would be a subheader to this H1. So I have opening caret, H1, closing caret, and that all together forms my opening tag. And then I have the text on my page, and then I have a closing tag, which is the same as an opening tag, except it just has this backslash right before the name of the tag. So you wrap your content in tags. So you have opening tag, whatever text applies to those tags, and then closing tag. Same thing down here. I have my opening paragraph tag, my paragraph, the text for my paragraph, and then my closing tag. So I chose some of the most common tags for this HTML file. This is by no means exhaustive, and I recommend going to the description and looking at some of those HTML resources for a list of every possible tag. But let's go through some of these most common ones so that you can get a sense of how they look. So we already did H1 and P. Let's do this link tag because that looks a little different. So we have the same opening caret A, which stands for link. And then I have this href, and then this link right here in quotes is a string. And so that means this is where my link should go. When the user clicks on my link, this is where it should take them. And so that's part of the opening tag you'll see here. So this is all part of the opening tag, and then it continues the exact same way. You have the text and then the closing tag. So if I were to click on this link, you can see on the bottom of the screen, it's telling me that it would take me to the Decrypted By Us YouTube page, which is where I wanted it to go. So how do you make lists? So you can either make an unordered list, a UL tag, or an ordered list, an OL tag. And the default appearance of an unordered list is to be bullets, and the default appearance of an ordered list is numbers. But you create them the same way. You have unordered list start, and then within it, you have your list items. So I have list item opening tag, text, list item closing tag. And then once I'm done with my list items, I just close off the entire list. And it's the same exact format for this ordered list here. Last thing I want to go over before jumping into CSS is the meaning of strong and M. So we have the same paragraph tags, but then within that, we have another tag, which is strong or emphasis. And that default appearance over here, you'll see strong is default to bold and emphasis defaults to italics. And so this brings up a question sometimes people ask, well, why wouldn't you just call it bold and italic, right? Why is it called strong and emphasis? Why is it not just called bold and italic? And that brings up a really important distinction between HTML and CSS, which is that yes, the default appearance is bold and italic, but it doesn't have to look that way. If I get into my CSS and I decide that I don't want to emphasize this through italics, I want to emphasize this by making it a different color, I want to make it bigger, I want to underline it. Those are choices that I can make in my CSS. It doesn't have to be italic. So once I start calling these tags bold or italic, I'm making a design choice, and you're not making design choices in your HTML. You are assigning meaning. So you are saying this should be emphasized, right? Because that assigns meaning to that element, but you're not saying how it should be emphasized. That's a design choice for your CSS. So that's an important distinction to remember, is to try to keep the purposes of HTML and CSS separate. So let's jump over to CSS. The way you connect HTML to a CSS file is through this line that I just uncommented here. You say link goes to the style sheet. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So you're saying this is going to my style sheet for this file. And then the same href we saw with the link, saying this points to the demo CSS file we have up here. And you close that link tag. So if I save this and I connect it to the CSS and I reload the page, now it's designed because I've written CSS to design this page. So how do we do CSS? Let's jump over and look. So the way you do CSS, there's a few different ways. The way we started off is by isolating tags in the HTML and designing those. So you'll see we have H1 that corresponds to this H1 tag in our HTML. So I isolated that H1 element, and then I specify the different properties that I want to change. So I say I have this H1 element, and within that, I want to change its color property to be blue. So I do the name of the property, a colon, what I want to change the property to, the value I want to assign it, and then a semicolon at the end of each line. So I say I want its color to be blue. I want its width to be 225 pixels. Normally it would default to be the full page. So this line here would go all the way to the end, but I made it 225, so it doesn't. And then I say its border around the element should be 3 pixels dotted purple. So you see that there. And so on and so forth with the other elements. You'll see that I isolated all the paragraph tags that we had in the HTML. And I said I want them to be pink. I want them to be Times New Roman. So you'll see that up here, I have this star. And this star means that it applies to everything on the page. So I said I want everything to be Roboto. But then down here, I say I want my paragraphs to be Times New Roman. So since paragraph is more specific than this star, because the star means everything, but paragraph doesn't mean everything, it's just the paragraphs. So since paragraph is more specific, it overrides the less specific one. So the web page is still Roboto because I didn't change the font here, but the paragraphs get changed because I selected just the paragraphs and I changed those. And then I said I want them to be underlined and I want them to be pink. So you'll notice all of the paragraphs are in Times New Roman and they're underlined and they're pink. Unordered list, I made it a hollow circle instead of the bullets. Link, I made it purple and I got rid of the underline because links, their default, they're underlined. I got rid of that. And then one other interesting thing to point out is that with links, you can use selectors, they're called. So you have hover. So this is the selector right here. And that means when I hover over the link, it turns green. So there are some more interesting things you could do with links. Like when you hover links or when you visit links, you can change the appearance based on how the user interacts with a certain element. And so links are the most common application of that. You can also do that kind of thing with buttons, like its appearance can change based on whether the user is hovering over it or has clicked it, etc. You might notice right now, if I want to change a paragraph, I have to change all the paragraphs. I have no more specific way of just isolating one paragraph, which is inconvenient because once I have longer pages, what if I just want to isolate one of my paragraphs and not all of them? So the way that I can do that is with classes in my HTML. So if we hop over to our HTML, you'll see that at the bottom, I have these two paragraphs, these two ones down here, and they look the same as my other paragraphs, except they say p class equals, and then I have my class name and string. And this is all part of my opening tag. So I named it diff to stand for different. Your class names can be whatever you want them to be. I recommend giving them some sort of meaning, but they can do whatever you want. So I have p class name diff, and then the exact same thing, my text to my closing tag. And then if I hop over to my CSS and I uncomment this at the bottom, the way that you isolate classes in your CSS is to do period and then the name of the class. So I have period diff and then the exact same thing. So for every element that has the class diff, I'm going to change its color to be red and its text decoration to be none. So that should change the bottom 2 paragraphs, because those are the ones with class diff, to be red and have no underline. So that's exactly what it did. Since those are the ones with class diff, only those 2 changed. So classes are a very helpful way to isolate more specific elements other than just their tags, because you might have a lot of elements with the same tag. And it's also important to note that this isn't limited to paragraphs. That's the example I chose, but I could go up here to H1 and I could do this, right? And then if I reloaded this, it would change to red. And that goes back to the same thing that I mentioned before about how more specific overrides, right? In this case, class is more specific than tag, and so it overrides. So diff class overrides the blue that I assigned to the H1 tag. But since I didn't change the width and the border in my diff, that stays the same as the H1, since I didn't make any kind of changes to that. So that's a basic overview of HTML and CSS. Please be sure to look at the resources in the description for some more in-depth coverage, and subscribe to our channel for some more videos about computer science topics and this topic in particular. Thanks.